Okay, I want to get into a straight up deal with no trade, with no financing. I want to get into a deal where the customer is not financing, they're paying real cash. Now understand, the majority of consumers do not pay real cash. Less than 5% of consumers nationwide pay cash. Now they may tell you it's cash, but it might be a home equity line of credit or a credit union or an outside lender somewhere in the background. Let's take a look. I'm just making these numbers up. Remember, I'm trying to make them look reasonably accurate. Okay, that would be my first pass on that type of deal. Now, the first thing I'd like you to notice, I put down payment and payments on a cash deal. This customer said, Mr. Ziegler, we're paying cash, but I still showed payments and down payment. Now look at the way I'm going to present this. The salesperson goes to management, gets the worksheet, goes back to the consumer. Mr. Customer, my manager made us an excellent proposal. I think you're really going to like these numbers. Market value of the vehicle you're purchasing today is $41,000. Ford Motor Company is giving you a $1,000 cash, a $1,000 value option discount. They pre-discounted this car, and there's a $3,000 cash back rebate, leaving you an adjusted sale price of $38,000 after all rebates and discounts. Mr. Customer, my management, our professional buyers have looked at the car you are selling to us. And based on what we have been able to buy or sell similar vehicles for recently, we're willing to buy your car somewhere between $14,911 and $15,621. We'll be paying off your old car to the credit union up to $13,900. Now, Mr. Customer, Patrick, I realize you're paying cash, but we're obligated to show you what the financial terms would have been were you financing with us. Even though you're paying cash, we're obligated to show you what the financial terms would have been. If you were financing with us, the banks would be looking for somewhere around 20%, and we'd be looking for a down payment check of that amount, which would give you 48 payments estimated somewhere between that amount and that amount. Write me a partial payment check for $1,000. I'll get everything started. Now, why in the world, John, did I give the customer the payment and the down payment when they told me they were paying cash?
Checking to see if there's a link.
I'm trying to see if there's any hidden financing here. I'm trying to flush out, make the birds fly, see if there's anything that they're hiding from me. How many times have I done that? And the customer said, well, Mr. Ziegler, I got that beat with my home equity line. Home equity line, I thought you said it was cash. Well, it's cash as far as you're concerned. I've heard that too many times. So I always put a down payment and a payment on a cash deal just to take their temperature. They might really be financing when they said it's cash. You follow what I'm saying? Now, the other reason I did that is because it would be pretty obvious that I hadn't discounted anything unless I put that there. By putting the payments in the down payment, I've opened up this deal at full list with no discount. Now let's pretend the customer says, Mr. Ziegler, I don't care about that down payment. I don't care about that payment. I am really paying cash. I don't care about that or that. And I'm not taking $15,621 for my trade. My trade is worth $22,000. Is that a realistic might happen scenario? The customer says, Mr. Ziegler, my trade's worth $22,000. The first thing I'm going to do, and there's 5 steps to this, or 4 steps to it, agree with the house. Step number 1, always say, Mr. Customer, $22,000 for your car sounds rather high to me. You know, that's the car you and I walked around and inspected together, right? Now you're telling me $22,000. That sounds kind of high. Never agree with a customer that we didn't give them enough for their trade. Yes, sir.
Look there. If he's a cash customer, how come he has a 13.4 payoff?
Well, because that's to a credit union. I'm just assuming. I could have shown it with no payoff, but
Okay, so he does. Okay, I was thinking that he paid cash for the first car, so therefore there's no payoff. But
now there is a payoff. I got a credit union payoff on this. Remember I said we'll be paying off $13.9 to your credit union. I just threw that in there to make the example more interesting. And I did it so you would see that, hey, maybe this guy is financing with the credit union. His last loan was through the credit union. Maybe it's not cash. That was a little thing I threw in there so you might think that.
What's ACV on that?
Who asked that? Who said that? Okay. Now, as a manager, if I'm penciling a deal, I will hold back as much as $1,500. So in other words, I'll take a trade that has a real value in this case of what would that be? $17,000. I'll take a vehicle that has a real cash value of $17,000 and I'll open it up at $15,621. Is that customer trying to buy my car for less than it's worth? I'm going to certainly make a run at buying theirs for a little less than it's worth. You know, I mean, they're trying to buy mine for less than it's worth. I'm going to try to buy theirs for less than it's worth. So, now that you ask. So, the customer says, Mr. Ziegler, my car is worth $22,000. When you're working with a customer like this, first of all, agree with the house. Don't ever say, yeah, that old lowball used car manager, somebody does it all the time. No, don't do that. You know. No, Mr. Customer, $22,000, that sounds kind of high to me for what you're driving. That's the car you and I looked at together, right? Step number 2, explain to the customer where our figure came from. Remember, everything I teach is based on having reasonable explanations that the people will accept. In the old days, you just used to try to hammer them or buffalo them. I'm trying to give these people reasonable explanations. And so the salesperson says, Mr. Customer, let me explain how we arrived at our figure. Our figure is based on the most and the least we have bought or sold a similar vehicle in this market for recently. You see, I've given them 2 figures. That's the high and the low that we bought or sold similar cars for lately. Now, Wally, the reason this is so powerful, you're saying, Mr. Customer, this is not based on my manager's opinion, not based on a book or a website. This value is based on actual Indianapolis, Indiana conditions, what cars like yours are actually being bought and sold for in this market. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
This is the real numbers, sir. We're basing it on actual transactions we've had in the last couple months. Mr. Customer, this is based on the most and the least that we have bought or sold a similar vehicle for. Now, listen to my word tracking here. I always say exactly what I mean. Did I say that is what we have bought or sold similar cars for lately? Is that what I said? What did I say, Rob? It's based on what we've been buying them and selling them for with a reasonable profit built in. Well, it's based on what we have bought or sold similar vehicles for lately. Say it that way. Sir, these figures are based on what we've been able to buy or sell similar vehicles for recently. Step number 3, ask the customer, where did you get your number? It's very important in a straight trade situation where you find out what they're basing their figure on. Sir, would you mind sharing with me how you arrived at $22,000 for that vehicle? What makes you feel that? Let's find out why they believe that. Very important, so you know what structure to put on this counter proposal. Well, Mr. Ziegler, the credit union guy told me my car's worth $22,000. He booked it out for me. Mr. Ziegler, I went on Kelley Blue Book, Edmunds Online, and they said my car was worth $22,000. Or they might say, Mr. Ziegler, I saw them advertised in the newspaper for $22,000. Or you got one right there on your lot for $22,000. You know, let's find out why they believe that. Patrick, does that make sense? I see so many salespeople don't know where the customer's coming from. Sir, how did you arrive at that figure? Would you mind sharing that with me? So the guy says, well, Mr. Ziegler, the guy at the credit union told me my car was worth $22,000. Now, do you recall earlier when I walked around the customer's car and inspected it with them? I want to bring all that information forward now. Mr. Customer, this is the same car you and I looked at together earlier, isn't it?
Yes.
Mr. Customer, did you tell the guy at the credit union that you had $2,500 of unresolved body damage on this car? No. Did you tell the guy at the credit union you had 4 bald tires, $1,600 minimum replacement? Did you tell the guy at the credit union you had a cracked windshield? Did you tell the guy at the credit union it had 128,000 miles on it and it's only 7 years old? You know, on and on and on, whatever the case. I mean, any number of things I could bring up in these conversations. So I'm looking for ways to devalue the trade based on reconditioning costs. Mr. Customer, to bring your car up to market value, we're going to have to do a certain amount of reconditioning. You got 4 bald tires, you got a cracked windshield, there's no spare tire in the trunk, you've got unresolved body damage, the car needs a paint job. I mean, what, you know, when you have a deal like this, your used car manager needs to give you a reconditioning report, what it's going to cost to bring this car up to value. The used car manager needs to pick that car apart for what it's going to cost to recondition it, and will at least deduct that much of the value. One of the things I, as a salesman, will ask a customer, Mr. Customer, 1 through 10, if you had to evaluate your own car, 10 being the way it was when you bought it brand new from the factory, it'll never be that way again, but when you bought the car from the showroom, it was a 10. Of course, it'll never be a 10 again, and the worst would be a 1. So somewhere between 10 and 1, what number would you put on your car right now for its current condition?
No, it's at least a solid 8.
Okay, it's an 8. Usually they say 7, by the way. The majority of people, just out of humility or whatever, are going to say 7. Sir, if you had to put a value on your car, you know, if you had to rate your car, I don't say put a value, if you had to rate your car 1 through 10, 10 being the way it was when you bought it brand new, absolutely perfect. When you picked it up from the factory, it was a 10. Of course, from the manufacturer, from the dealer, it was a 10. It'll never be that way again, but it was a 10 when you picked it up. 1 being the worst. What number would you put on this car, sir?
7.
7. Now, sometimes the math will work out really well, where I can say to the customer, sir, you told me you paid $20,000 for this car new. And sir, you told me it was a 7. 70% of 20,000 is 14,000. We're giving you 16. I'm giving you more than you personally thought it was worth. You told me your car was worth 70% of its original value a minute ago. You said it was a 7. Sometimes if the math works out, I'll use that analogy with them. What are you laughing about, Jim? Sometimes that works. I look at the math and check it out before I bring that up. Okay, the guy at the credit union told me my car was worth $22,000. Mr. Customer, did you take the car physically over to the credit union or just tell you the number on the telephone?
Just called him and told him.
Did you tell him the car had body damage? Did you tell him it had high mileage? Did you act like a 10 when you told me it was a 7?
I forgot.
No, you forgot. I'm going to work that figure really hard. Mr. Customer, you're telling me you saw him in the newspaper for $22,000. Sir, let me point out to you that the figure people advertise is the asking price. They don't intend to sell it for that. And let me tell you something else. The fact that it's in the newspaper means nobody's paid that for it yet. It wouldn't still be in there if somebody bought it for that. You follow me? Well, you got one on your lot for $22,000. The one on my lot is dealer certified, reconditioned completely, and bears a warranty. You know, there's any number of things I can bring in. I say, sir, I don't mean to be offensive to you, but I can have a truckload of identical cars just like yours every bit in as good or better condition on this lot this afternoon, truckload of them for $15,600 each. I don't mean to be offensive to you, sir, but I can have truckloads of cars identical to yours on this lot before the sun sets for $15,600 each. That's what they're actually being bought and sold for in the market. I don't mean to be offensive, sir, but my manager certainly isn't paying $22,000. Is there a number closer to that that you could feel comfortable letting me take and see if he'll do? Do you have a number closer to that? And the customers, how close to 15.6? Remember I said how close to the down payment? Now I'm saying how close to that number. How close to that number could I take to my management that you would own the car right now? The guy was at 22,000. He comes back and says, I'll tell you what, I'll do 19,000. I mean, the salesperson works and works and works. You do the best you can. The best you can do is 19,000. Okay, Mr. Customer, let me be sure I understand. If we can get to 19,000 for your car, you'll do business right now? Yes, I will. Regardless of how we have to structure that, if I can get to 19,000 for your car, you'll do business right now. Have you ever had a dealer let a customer out on a number you know they won't do? Let me tell you how you handle that. I got a customer on a number I know the other dealer won't do. Go into a room in your dealership where nobody will hear the paging system. Do you have such a room? And call the other dealership with the customer sitting there, preferably on a speakerphone, and ask for the salesman or the manager that let them out on that figure. And say, hello, I'm John Jenkins from Employees Federal Credit Union. I've got Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins here, and they said that I need the figures and the serial number on that car. We're going to put a lien on it for the amount that you said. And I've had managers, well, we didn't exactly say we're going to sell it to them for that, and they start backing out when they think the credit union is putting a lien on it. Have your finance manager act like they're the credit union putting a lien on the car and watch the other dealer back out. Is that a good tactic? Done it many times. The manager at the other dealership starts stuttering. Well, I didn't exactly say I could do that. I said, well, and about that time you still got the customers under captivity.
Or you find out the customer's lying when you pick up the phone.
And if you're lying, what will the customer do? They won't let you make the call. Okay, 19,000. Sir, will you own the car if my management does that? Yes, I will. Now I go to the back of the worksheet. Okay, at $22,091.33 trade difference plus tax, title tag, and free and clear title to your car. How much money did I offer him for his trade? $22,091 trade difference plus tax, title, free and clear title. What did I offer him? What? $15,908.67. But what did he want? He wanted $19,000. I moved less than $300. But I switched to pure trade difference on the last pass. This is going to be the biggest lesson that I'm going to teach in negotiation. Never react to the customer's number. Always react to the very last number you gave them. Am I making good sense? Never react to the number they gave you. Now I'm going to prove to you that you do this. I'm going to prove to you how much money you are throwing away needlessly in your negotiations. Because there are people in this room, oh, I don't do that. Yes, you do. You do it every day. Just yesterday in your dealership, somebody said the words I'm about to say. He wants to be at $22,000 for his trade. How close can we get to it? How many times Has somebody in your dealership, maybe you, gone to the sales management and said, he wants $22,000 for his trade. How close can we get to it? I don't want to get close to his number. I'll tell the salesman, I want him to take 15,621. How close can you get him to it? You see the difference in thought process? I came $300 off my last offer. Now let me tell you what most of you would have done. You don't need to defend this to me, but you need to discuss it with yourself. Most people in this room, if the customer had come back at 19, by the way, is 19 a deal? What? Remember, I admitted to you I had 17 in the car. I got 17 in the trade. I got a $3,000 rebate covering up. I got a $1,000 deal minimum plus full gross in the car. I got a pretty good deal at 19. I told you I had 17 in the trade. If he came back at 19, I've got a deal. Most of you would have done what I'm about to say. And you don't need to justify to me, you'd have come back at 18.5. Most managers would have looked at that 19,000 figure and said, hey, I got a deal. Let's see if we can bump another 500. Me, I said, he came back at 19,000, I'm going to come back at 15,908. I'm going to come back slightly off my last offer. Instead of trying to get close to his number, I'm going to come slightly off my own last number. Remember earlier I talked to you about the Honda store in Renton, Washington, doing $3,000 a car with mostly Asian programmers from Microsoft? We give our customers far too much credit. The last thing I want to talk to you about today is prospecting. I want to switch gears completely. I have sold hundreds of automobiles, maybe thousands, to strangers I meet in the community. I sell 7, 8, 10, 12 cars a month, every month right now, with people I met in the community, like that lead I gave Dane earlier. I pull people out of the community all the time, and there's two questions I ask. Question number one, when are you going to buy your next car? If you were to ask 10 complete strangers that question, you will deliver a car to somebody you never met before. I've sold cars to people I met in supermarket lines. Standing in a supermarket line, I said, when are you going to buy your next car? And actually transacted a deal. Hundreds, maybe thousands. When are you going to buy your next car? One of the most powerful prospecting questions in the world. In 1988, I flew into Dallas to Westway Ford, one of the biggest Ford dealers in the country. And Cameron Rieger and Jeff Enright, the general manager and finance director, picked me up at the airport. And they took me to Papa Do's restaurant, which is a Cajun restaurant, really good place. And the waiter was a Cambodian guy. His name was Tron. I remember this clearly. I says, Tron, when are you going to buy your next car? He said, oh, Mr. Ziegler, you must be a car salesman. I said, yes, I am. He said, I just bought a car. He said, I bought a Mitsubishi Eclipse. I said, man, you guys must be wealthy. They must be overpaying you in this restaurant. He says, no, Mr. Ziegler, the truth of the matter is my parents live in Cambodia. I'm a college student and they're wealthy. He said, I'm just working here. I said, okay, well, who else in this restaurant needs a car? There's the follow-up question. Who do you know? The follow-up question is, who do you know? He said, Melinda Steele, the night manager. And that really was her name. Tron brought Melinda Steele over to the table. And he also brought me a Vietnamese busboy who bought a used car for $2,000 cash. I made 2 sales. I had not been in town an hour. And I had 2 deliveries. When are you going to buy your next car? Last summer I was in San Antonio, Texas at Quality Automotive. Now, most of the cars I sell today are to waiters in restaurants and desk clerks. Because when I travel, that's who I get to meet. You know, I'm not out in the community. Waiters and desk clerks are all, when I sell 8 or 10, 12 cars a month, waiters and desk clerks. The lead I gave Dane, waiter, you know. But I was in San Antonio, Texas, just a couple months ago, and Liberty Jeep Chrysler Plymouth down there, John Fielder's the dealer. And I'm in a restaurant, who would have guessed, and I asked the waitress, I said, when are you going to buy your next car? Long story short, I delivered her in a Jeep Liberty. And the fun part about that whole transaction, every salesperson in that dealership, oh, she's a friend of mine. I know her. I eat there every day. That's my deal. Well, shit, the out-of-town consultant had to come in and sell it. You didn't sell her anything. When are you going to buy your next car? One of the most powerful questions in the world. And if they don't buy from you, who do you know? Who works in this restaurant, in this hotel, in this health club that also needs a car?